What if some of the most practical wisdom for living harmoniously, respecting nature, and managing shared spaces came not from a modern self-help guru, but from ancient monastic texts? That's what we're unpacking today.
Okay, let's unpack this.
We are diving deep into the Pācittiya sections of the Vinaya. These are, ancient Buddhist monastic rules. And what's truly fascinating is that these aren't just abstract spiritual guidelines. Not at all. They often arose from very specific incidents within the monastic community, really designed to foster order, discipline, and compassionate living. And a Pācittiya offense itself signifies an act that required expiation, meaning, well, it needed to be acknowledged and resolved. Right. So our mission today is to deep dive into these rules, uncover the surprising details behind them, and discover how their underlying principles still resonate, really resonate, with our modern lives. We want to provide you with a shortcut to being truly well-informed on some remarkably relevant ancient wisdom. Let's jump right into perhaps the most surprising rules, the ones that feel incredibly modern, almost, counterintuitive for an ancient text. How these early monastics were instructed to interact with plants and water. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Indeed, yeah, this is fascinating stuff. The rule on harming plant life, Pācittiya, gives us a remarkable glimpse into this. It actually originated when a group of monks, the Vagga monks, were cutting down a tree for construction near a shrine. And the story goes that a tree deity, which reflects that ancient belief in spirits inhabiting nature, actually
Complained. To whom?
to the Buddha, presumably, or made her displeasure known, because her child was harmed by the falling tree. And it wasn't just the deity. Local people also voiced their discontent. They saw these early Buddhist monastics, the Pācittiya ascetics, as harming. Get this. Single-sense faculty living beings.
Wow. Single sense faculty living beings for plants. That's a profound concept for back then.
It really is.
Yeah.
So the Buddha strongly condemned the act, and that led directly to the rule prohibiting a monk from cutting or causing to cut any plant.
So they didn't just say don't harm trees then. They went into a lot more detail, right? It wasn't just a general guideline.
Oh, absolutely. Very specific.
Yeah.
The rule meticulously defines plant life, Bhūtagāmavaggo, to include 5 broad categories. This isn't just about big trees. It covers plants that grow from roots, like ginger or turmeric, then those from stems, like banyan trees, big ones. Plants that sprout from joints, like bamboo or sugarcane. Those from new shoots or sprouts, like basil maybe. And finally, plants that grow from seeds, cereals, beans, that sort of thing.
That's incredible.
It was a really comprehensive classification, made sure no form of plant life was sort of accidentally overlooked.
An amazing level of ecological awareness considering the time period.
Right.
Just amazing. And it wasn't just plants, was it? There was a similar concern for water.
Exactly. Pācittiya XX deals with using water with living beings.
Mm.
And interestingly, the same group, the Vagga monks, were involved again.
Oh, them again.
They knowingly sprinkled water containing living beings. We're probably talking about tiny organisms visible to the eye, or perhaps pointed out by others. Sprinkle this water onto turf or clay for construction purposes. So the Buddha established a rule. A monk is prohibited from knowingly sprinkling water containing living beings on turf or clay, or causing it to be sprinkled.
And that word knowingly is important here.
Absolutely key. Whether they observed the life themselves or if someone else informed them, hey, there are living beings in that water, that knowledge made the act an offense.
So what's the real takeaway here? We're seeing this explicit, really detailed, ancient concern for plant life and water, right down to, well, maybe not microscopic in our sense, but tiny visible organisms. The true genius, maybe, isn't just that they cared, but that they understood ecological impact at such a fundamental level. They framed environmental responsibility not just as some lofty ideal, but as a practical, rule-bound necessity for community harmony.
Precisely.
And this single-sense faculty view, it forces us to see nature not just as a resource to be used, but as, an interdependent community.
Yeah.
It's a perspective that feels startlingly ahead of its time and incredibly relevant for our own discussions on climate and conservation today. Okay, so from how they treated the natural world, let's move inside the monastery. It's fascinating how meticulously these rules also governed human interaction, because even in a spiritual community, human nature, friction, it inevitably exists, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And this is where we see the real pragmatism of the Vinaya. Pācittiya XII, concerning evasion and obstruction, illustrates this perfectly. It stems from a situation with a monk named Venerable Channa.
Okay.
When he was interrogated about an offense in the monastic assembly, Channa would try to dodge the issue. He'd ask these overly specific, almost irrelevant questions like, who was offended? What is offended? in what is offended. You get the idea.
Like a filibuster.
Sort of, yeah. Or sometimes he'd just remain silent. Stonewalling.
Yeah.
So the rule is established. It prohibits a monk from acting as an evader, that's Vagga, changing the subject, or an obstructor via Saka, remaining silent to hinder the process when being properly questioned about an offense.
Okay, so no wriggling out of it when you're being asked to account for something. That certainly sounds familiar in other contexts too, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
What about how monks express dissatisfaction with others? Grumbling, complaining.
Yep, there's a rule for that too. Pācittiya the 13th. Grumbling and blaming. The incident behind this one involved monks complaining about Venerable Dhamma. He was the monk in charge of assigning lodging and distributing food.
Ah, the quartermaster, basically.
Exactly. And these monks accused him of favoritism because they felt they got poor lodging and food. So the rule prohibits a monk from blaming or grumbling about a formally appointed monk, like one in charge of lodging or food, with the specific intent to discredit them.
That makes a lot of sense. You can't just undermine someone doing their job out of spite. But I'm curious, what if the complaints were legitimate? Did the rules allow monks to genuinely raise issues?
That's a great question. It gets to the nuance. The rule really targets malicious blaming or, grumbling, meant to undermine someone's reputation or authority, especially doing it behind their back or without going through proper channels. It wasn't about stifling legitimate grievances. Those are supposed to be handled through more formal processes of complaint and reconciliation within the community. It's about ensuring fairness and preventing the spread of, let's say, baseless rumors or personal attacks.
What's truly fascinating here, then, is how these rules seem less about specific punishments, like you did X, so Y happens. It's more about fostering respectful, transparent communication, accountability within the community.
Exactly.
It teaches us that honest, direct engagement rather than evasion or backbiting is fundamental to any functional group, even if it means confronting uncomfortable truths sometimes. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many modern team disagreements or even, online spats could be avoided with a clearer framework for handling grievances directly and openly.
That's a good point.
Now let's shift focus again to the really practical stuff, the nitty-gritty of communal living. How these monks were expected to treat shared property and spaces. It paints a surprisingly vivid picture of everyday life in an ancient monastery.
Oh, these rules are incredibly detailed and clearly born from very human experiences, little slip-ups and problems.
Right.
Take Pācittiya forcing, for example. This one's about leaving communal furniture outdoors.
Okay.
The story goes that monks would put communal items, beds, chairs, cushions, mats outside to sun them, probably in winter. Good idea, right?
Sure. Makes sense. Air them out.
Right. But then they just wander off. Didn't put them away, didn't ask anyone else to, didn't get permission to leave them out, and naturally the items got damaged. Weather, maybe animals. So the rule was established. If a monk spreads out communal furniture outdoors and departs without putting it away or arranging for it to be put away or asking permission, they incur an offense. And it applied to all sorts of shared items, different types of beds, chairs, various cushions, even specific kinds of mats.
So basically, clean up after yourself with shared stuff. If you leave the community cushion out and it gets rained on, that's on you.
Pretty much. And it wasn't just things left outside, was it?
No, exactly. Pācittiya XV, leaving communal bedding indoors, follows the same principle.
This rule apparently came about because some monks left communal bedding blankets, mats, floor spreads just spread out inside a monastery building. And they left.
Let me guess.
Ants. The result was that ants found it and, well, had a feast.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, I can see why they'd make a rule about that.
Right. So the rule is similar to the outdoor one, but specifically applies to bedding left inside a communal dwelling. Both rules really highlight this profound emphasis on mindfulness and responsibility for shared resources, treating communal property as carefully as, or even more carefully than, your own.
It's like a very early, very serious version of a shared space etiquette guide, like rules for a dorm room, but with enlightenment as the goal. And I hear there were rules about how monks interacted with each other within those shared spaces, too, not just the furniture they left lying around.
Oh, absolutely. The rules addressed everything from, well, subtle passive aggression to outright physical removal. It's quite something.
Passive aggression in a monastery.
Yep. Pācittiya the 6th, taking over another space. It recounts an incident where this group of monks, the 6 group monks they're often called, intentionally arranged their bedding right next to senior monks' beds. The specific intent was to make the senior monks feel cramped and uncomfortable, hoping they'd just give up and leave.
Wow.
So the rule prohibits a monk who knows another monk is already occupying communal dwelling space, prohibits them from intentionally taking over that space or crowding them, specifically to force the other monk out. So no strategic bed arrangements to drive your roommate away.
No passive-aggressive couch hogging, as we might say today. Okay, so that's the subtle end. What if things escalated? What if someone actually tried to physically kick someone out?
They covered that too. Pācittiya is about forcibly expelling a monk. Here, rival factions of monks, the 6th group again, arguing with the 17th group, got angry and displeased, and they physically dragged and expelled the other monks from a communal monastery they were all supposed to be repairing together.
Good grief.
Yeah. So the rule explicitly states that a monk who, out of anger and displeasure, pulls out or causes another monk to be pulled out of a communal dwelling incurs an offense. It really underscores the immense value placed on a safe, harmonious communal environment. Even when, serious disputes arose, you couldn't just physically throw someone out.
That's a pretty intense rule, but it shows how serious they were about maintaining basic harmony and respect for personal space, even within a shared building. Did they also have rules for, the structural integrity of the buildings themselves, being careful?
Surprisingly, yes. Very practical. Pācittiya 8, careless use of upper floors.
Okay, this sounds specific.
It is. There was an incident where a monk carelessly sat or perhaps jumped onto a bed that had detachable legs. This was on an upper floor of a communal dwelling. A leg broke through the floorboards and hit a monk who was sitting or meditating below.
Ouch! Oh my goodness.
Exactly. So the rule prohibits a monk from sitting or lying on a bed or chair with detachable legs when it's placed on an upper story of a communal dwelling. It's all about preventing damage and injury through, foresight and just being careful. Common sense, really, but codified.
Right. Don't break the floor and injure the person downstairs.
Yeah.
Got it. And finally, there was a rule about the actual construction of the monastery itself, which brings us back to Venerable Chana, you mentioned.
Indeed. Good memory. Pācittiya, over-supervising monastery construction. Venerable Chana, again, was the focus here. He apparently kept re-roofing and replastering an already completed monastery, one built by his lay supporter. Maybe he was a perfectionist or just overzealous. But his constant additions led to the monastery becoming overloaded. It actually collapsed. And not only that, the debris damaged a nearby Brahmin's barley field. So collateral damage, too.
Right.
So the rule specifies that a monk constructing a large monastery should only supervise the work up to certain stages, like, say, plastering up to the doorframe level or finishing the window work. And there were even conditions about where they could stand while supervising, usually not on green ground, unprepared earth, which might imply instability or further damage unless specifically allowed. Going beyond these stages or supervising for the wrong spot incurred an offense. It seems aimed at preventing over-engineering, waste, unnecessary additions, and, damaging your neighbor's crops.
Wow. So these rules, all born from these very specific, very human events, they paint such a vivid picture. The challenges and surprisingly practical solutions they came up with for living in close quarters, what we can really draw from this is just a profound emphasis on respect. Respect for shared property, mindfulness of how your actions impact others, responsible resource management. It's a deep dive into practical, everyday ethics that still feels incredibly relevant, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, these Pācittiya rules, they're so meticulously detailed, often arising from very human errors and foibles. But they offer these timeless insights into the challenges of just living together. Communal living, ethical behavior, they teach us about personal responsibility, consideration for others, and the subtle yet profound ways our actions affect not just the people immediately around us, but our shared environment, our collective well-being.
So considering these ancient principles, mindful living, careful interaction, taking responsibility, how might our modern shared spaces, our homes, our workplaces, even our online communities, how might they be transformed if we applied similar levels of awareness and consideration? Something to think about long after this deep dive.